Hello everyone, I'm Rafael Alvarez and this is Alvarez Metalworks. So today what we got going on is, if you look down here, we're going to be assembling the 40-pound Harbor Freight blast cabinet. Okay, now for those of you that have been following my channel for a little bit, you know that there's a introductory video about this. This is part 2 of that, the assembly. Basically, let me give you guys kind of the rundown. This is the proper assembly according to Mike, the owner of a company called the Tacoma Company, who builds an upgrade kit for this cabinet. I spoke with Mike a number of times over the last couple weeks. A couple days ago, I spoke with him at length for about 3 hours about the proper assembly of this cabinet. I jotted down a bunch of notes. I'm going to go over with you guys his version of the proper assembly of this cabinet. Now, the reason why I'm going with his advice on how to properly build this cabinet and not Harbor Freight's instructions is because this man has been in the blast industry for longer than I've been alive, and he's been working with these Chinese import blast cabinets for years and years and years, and trying to develop kits that can make them perform at the same levels as blast cabinets that range in the thousands of dollars. So, with that being said, I'm new to blasting. My knowledge of blast cabinets is as simple as you put the part in, you press the trigger, or you press down the pedal, and you start spraying until the part is clean, and then you're done. Okay, that's not very knowledgeable, and after talking with him at length for a number of different times, I can tell you that my knowledge of this is minuscule at best, and I can tell you that everywhere I've searched online for information about blast cabinets and blasting in general is extremely limited, and a lot of people don't have a ton of knowledge about this, even when it comes to people that do this for a living. You know, the fact of the matter is that there's some people out there that, even though they do it for a living, their job consists of put the part in the cabinet, blast it all off, take the part out, and get the next part. You know, people like Mike have been in this industry long enough where they have a firm understanding of the different types of media. They have a firm understanding of what makes this cabinet better than the next cabinet. And because this is what he does for a living, and he's been doing it again longer than I've been alive, I've dedicated all of these videos that I'm gonna create to, you know, in regards to sandblasting, to his knowledge, and basically sharing his knowledge with you guys. I'm not gonna vary off from what he's telling me and implement my own design aspects, anything like that. I'm gonna do everything to the T on how he described it for me. Okay, so now with that being said, what we need to talk about is 2 things. The changes that we're going to make to this Harbor Freight blast cabinet are as simple as, if I'm to try to sum it up, will be the vacuum system and the, how do I want to describe this? Media management or media efficiency. With a good blast cabinet, when you're talking about really high grade commercial cabinets, you don't have any ledges or things like that inside of the cabinet that can collect blast media. The blast media easily, once it comes out of the gun, gets back down to the bottom of the cabinet and doesn't sit on any little lips or anything like that where it can collect. The reason why that's a bad deal is, if you're doing blasting properly, you should be using different types of media for the same job sometimes, and for different jobs. Now, if you're doing blasting on a regular basis, unless you're blasting the same type of thing all the time, you're gonna want to change out the media in your cabinet so that you can blast different things. You're not going to want to have 3 or 4 different cabinets with different types of blast media in them. That'd get very expensive. So with that being said, you want to be able to use the least amount of blast media in your cabinet as possible, as well as be able to make sure that it's as easy as possible to change out the media, where you don't have it collecting on these ledges and lips and things like that that you have to go in and try to thoroughly clean it out before you put a different type of media in there, because then you cross-contaminate the different types of media, which is a bad deal. So we'll talk about all of that stuff more at length, maybe not in this video, but in future videos. However, these are the reasons why we're going to modify this cabinet on its initial assembly. I do not have the modification kit that Mike builds, the Tacoma company builds, to change out basically the guts of the cabinet. He's going to be sending me that this week. There's going to be a whole nother video on how to install that. At this point, what we're doing is just the assembly of the cabinet based on his directions, and installing the stock components and testing it, and then at some point I'll test that out in a future video to compare it with the upgraded version. So this video is solely just the modifications that need to be made to assemble it. So with that being said, let's get started on this, and we'll go through this in a step-by-step process so that you can see what you should be doing to make this cabinet perform to the best of its ability. So be right back. Okay, so now we have everything laid out here on my shop floor. I've had it laid out on my shop floor since I opened the box. The reason why I opened the box and laid everything out is because I contacted Mike over at the Tacoma company after I had all the pieces in front of me so that I can see everything that I was working with, and he can describe to me the changes that need to be made to this during assembly. So, with that being said, the first step that I'm going to do is start assembling the hopper. Okay, that's these triangle pieces here. And the reason why I'm going to do that first is because this is kind of a 2-day build if you're doing this thing based on his directions, because you have some polyurethane caulking that you're going to use that needs to cure and set up. So, you know, you have to factor that in. So the hopper is the part that has that polyurethane on there, so we're going to start with that, and then we'll continue on with the rest of it. So let me get all the pieces together, let me get set up, and we'll start assembling this. Okay, so first things first, we have these two larger panels that in my version of this kit have this, it's not a double stick tape, it's a foam tape that they're using as a gasket material. We're going to remove all of that. Okay, we're going to actually remove all of that from the entire cabinet. But I'm going to show you guys quickly how to remove that. It's pretty easy without having a ton of cleanup. If you don't do it this way, you see this area right here where I have some residue from the foam tearing apart. You'll have that all over the place if you just try to peel this off. What I'm using is a butane torch or a MAP gas torch. These things are kind of expensive. You don't really need that. You could use like a heat gun or something. You could just grab a cheap one. Or if you have one, use what you got. But basically the goal is to heat up the contact surface where the adhesive is bonding to this. And then there's a specific way that I'm going to show you how to remove this. You're not going to just pull it away like that. What you're going to do is you're going to pull it this way, as in like stretching it, and it comes right off, okay? It comes off cleanly. So I'm just giving it a little bit of heat. And not pulling very hard, and it starts peeling right off, okay? Now you want to try to avoid burning it, so that's why I'm heating it from the back side. And this is trying to fall off my cart here, so bear with me. And that's okay if it breaks off like that. And move this down out of the way. And there, it's all off. It's as simple as that. Okay, so before we bolt anything together, this is what I'm going to suggest that we do. This is the hardware kit that comes with the cabinet. If you look here, each one of these little pouches has numbers on here. in the instructions, and this is really the only reason we're going to use these instructions. There's a couple other reasons, but in the instructions, when we get ready to do the hopper, it says that we need the bolt 47. We need the nut and the washer. That is, the washer's 58 and the nut is 53. So if we come to this, we're looking for basically this panel right here. All of these are what's going to be used for that. Okay? So, with that being said, what I'm going to suggest here is that you take this whole thing, flip it over, and like I did, you can see, it's kind of hard to see, but they're perforations for you to cut out the back sides of these panels. I marked these with the numbers so that I can leave this upside down and I'll be able to not have to worry about spilling this, flipping it back over to find out which section is what number. So, I suggest you do that. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull out all of the hardware for the funnel. They're calling it the funnel, I call it the hopper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in this picture you see here how they have the bolts going from the outside in. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to put them from the inside out, and we're going to modify the bolts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these bolts and take them over to my bench grinder, and I'm going to grind down the heads. Okay, yes, I know, these are Phillips heads. If I grind them down, how am I going to tighten them up? Don't worry about that. What the object is to be able to get these to be as flat as possible without compromising the bolt itself and the head of the bolt itself and not allowing it to work. So sit tight, let me get these things out. I'm going to grab a pair of pliers, we'll get over there to the bench grinder and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I've got a little plastic bin here. I took out 22 of these bolts, okay? Now, the 22 bolts, the reason why there's 22 is that covers all four sides of the hopper bolting together, as well as the little trap door at the bottom of the hopper. Okay, and we'll talk about that as soon as we're done with this. Now, I'm just grabbing this with a set of pliers and holding it just like that. Okay, now my goal is to remove some of the top surface of this and try to make this a little flatter. I'm not going to go too far with it, but I'm going to try to remove some of it. The reason why we're doing that is, even though this may seem minuscule to some people, these bolt heads are going to hold media right in the corners of where that hopper bolts together. So the goal is to try to make those as flat as possible, as smooth as possible, so that the media flows over the top of them and gets down to the bottom of the hopper as easily as possible, rather than accumulating on the bolt heads. So start this up. Limited in space here, so if I end up getting in the way of this, forgive me. Okay, so here's what we're looking at doing, or here's at least what I'm doing. You can do whatever you want to, but this is what's recommended by Mike over at Tacoma Company. So I'm basically taking it down to that point right there, okay? And I'm going to do that with all 27 or 22 screws, bolts, whatever you want to call them. And then I'm going to start assembling, but after I show you the modifications that need to be done on the little trap door. No, you can no longer grab this with the screwdriver, okay? Basically, when we put it together, I don't really want to touch this right now. We're going to just press it with our hand and tighten it down as much as we can tighten it down like that, okay? With using a wrench or something, a ratchet on the nut side, and just putting pressure on this side until it tightens down as much as it can. We're going to be using a polyurethane caulking adhesive on that section, so it's okay that we're doing this. All right, So just trust me here. So I'm going to go through the rest of these 22, and I'll be right back once I'm done with that, and we'll go over the modifications that need to be done on the trap door, and then we'll start putting this together. Okay, everyone. Basically what we have here is the trap door. This is the factory, the way the factory has set it up. There's a couple of things that you need to pay attention to before you use this. Okay, this is a pretty decent piece from them, but there's some issues in manufacturing that need to be adjusted and taken a look at before you actually install this. Number one is, well, let me show you how this works. You have this cammed style latch, bolt, whatever you want to call it. You turn it like this. It falls in line with that area here, and it allows the door to swing open. Okay, this part remains on the bottom of the hopper, and this is the door that comes up and seals the media from falling out of the cabinet. The problem is that this is not manufactured properly because they're rushing through it, you know, and trying to manufacture this for the least amount of money possible. So there's some issues that need to be addressed. They're really simple to address. If you look inside here, and I know it's going to be very difficult for you to see, but basically look at the foam, okay, along the edge. Right here where the cam lock is, and I'm just calling it a cam lock because I don't really know what the proper name is. You can see, let me see if I can show you this. I don't even know how well it's showing up. But if you look there, the foam that's on this door is pinched down, and it kind of has like a pillowed effect where you push down on it right along this edge. But as you get towards the hinge side of it, you notice that is no longer doing that. Okay, the reason why that's the case is on this side you have the cam pulling this tight. On this side you have a hinge. The hinge is not lined up properly, so we're going to tweak that, okay? And it's a real simple deal to do. Basically, open this up, put a screwdriver or something in between here, and bend it slightly. You don't want to go too much and break the welds or anything like that. You're just bending it slightly, you're closing it, you're taking another look at it and seeing if it's sitting tighter, okay? The goal is to make it sit tight, nice and tight. The other thing that we're looking at is this piece. If you see in manufacturing, it's essentially two U-shaped pieces of metal that are stamped and formed, and then they're tacking them together along this seam and along this seam. Okay, during manufacturing, if you look, and I know it's subtle, but if you look at this edge right here, it's not perfectly 100% flat. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this back over to our angle grinder, and we're going to make sure that this area here on both sides of the door end are flat. If it's not flat, you can create a situation where you have an air gap here. So we're going to grind that down, make sure it's flat, tweak the hinge, and I'll be right back. Okay, so if you look here, I grinded these areas down with my angle or with my bench grinder. You can use a flap disc or something like that. Just don't get too carried away that it ends up being wavy. The point is to make it flat and smooth so you get a nice seal, not remove too much material where you don't get a seal anymore. If you look here, I've done there's a bunch of marring marks on this hinge. They've got a pretty, I wouldn't say decent, but pretty beefy weld on here. So it made it difficult to bend this. Yours may be different because they're all going to have different welds on them. But basically, the goal is to try to get this to be at a higher position so that when you close the lid, it presses down in this area of the seal better. Okay? So I've done that a little bit. Hopefully it's good enough. If it's not, then I'll keep tweaking on it later. We'll see. But that's the goal. The point of that is to get this door to seal up as good as possible so that you don't lose any media from leaking out of the bottom of the cabinet. Okay? So now that we have that done, we're going to start assembling the four sides and this. And so I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are on the shop floor. I have to go grab my knee pads from my car, but we'll deal with that during a different segment. You're looking for, well, first off, I've got all the bolts, the heads ground down. I've got 22 nuts and 22 washers here from that same segment in the packaging. So now we have this that came inside the kit, inside Harbor Freight's assembly kit. Now, I didn't go through Harbor Freight's instructions on what to use this for. What this is a very, very, very thin double stick tape. Okay, we're going to use this in replacement of that original foam gasket. Now, let me explain to you why we're not using that foam gasket. It's quite simple. If you look at these flanges here, let me get up to make sure you guys got a good look at this. If you look at these flanges here, like right where my hand is, see how it's distorted and bent? Okay, that's a factory issue, but however, this is very thin metal. Okay, I don't know what gauge it is. There's some sort of a coating, powder coat or paint on it, but it's very thin metal. Now, the distance between this bolt and this bolt is pretty great. We're talking at least, I would say 6-8 inches. So, if we have a piece of foam that is pretty thick between here and here, when the bolt comes down and it clamps down here and clamps down here, what it's going to do is create like a pillowed effect, like a quilting effect. When you see people quilt blankets, everywhere there's stitches, everything's really tight. But between the stitches, it's pillowed up. Okay, the problem with that is that in this situation, if it pillows up, you're distorting the flange and you're potentially creating a gap in the flange. So we're not going to use that because of that. Anywhere I see these factory bends in here, I'm going to flatten those out before I start assembling. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that real paper thin double stick tape and we're going to run it down the center of the flange so that it's lined up center on the holes, okay? And we're going to do that everywhere there's a flange. Now, we obviously, on this hopper, there's 4 flanges that bolt together. We're not going to take all 4 panels and put tape on all 4 flanges. There's 1 piece of tape per joint, okay? So, I hope that makes sense to you guys. So, you have 4 joints, 4 pieces of tape, not 2 pieces of tape on each one of the joints, or each panel that makes 1 joint. So, I'm getting a little tongue-tied, but I think you guys understand what I'm getting at. So, I'm going to straighten out the flanges on this. I'm going to install that double stick tape, and then we'll get started on, I'll show you guys the assembly process, which is real simple. We're putting the bolts from the inside out so that the nuts are on the outside. And, we'll start with all 4 panels, assembling them, and then we'll put the little trap door, the little access hole, so that we can drain all the media out once it's time to do that. So, be right back. Let me straighten up these panels, and then we'll get to it. Okay, so got the tape. Just try not to make a mess of what I'm doing here. And I'm going to put the double stick tape, these larger triangulated panels are the front and the back. We're going to put the double stick tape on the inside of the flange, okay? On all 4 of those flanges. So, we're going to center it on the bolt holes. So, you see there how I have that? We're going to do that on all 4 of these. a little bit awkward. I really wish I wasn't doing this on the floor, but I just have too many things on my welding table and the other benches to be able to do this. There. So, plus all the parts are on the floor where I'm working. So, it is what it is. So I was doing there is just straightening out a little bend that I didn't catch before. Now, this tape method here that we're doing is something that Mike informed me that is new to his install instructions or assembly instructions. It's something that Harbor Freight has decided to put in this kit, and he figured, well, you know, it'll help with not just sealing, but it'll also help with the structure by having the double stick tape in place. So, how much that is, who knows? But that's the idea and the concept behind it, so that's why we're doing it. It's not going to hurt. It's too thin to hurt it. So, now, what I'm going to do is on this flange that I'm working on, I'm going to take off the white part of the tape, you know, the protective part of it. I'm going to take my side panel and I'm going to join these together. But before I join them together, I'm going to cut everywhere there's a bolt hole. I'm going to cut a relief for the bolt to go through that double stick tape. The reason I'm doing that is because if I don't, I could potentially cause that double stick tape to wad up in those areas, which would defeat the purpose and kind of create some buildup that we're trying to avoid. So, because we have a double stick tape on this flange, you have to be very careful when it comes to alignment and making sure that everything is aligned before you really start putting pressure on that seam or the joint and getting the double stick tape to stick to it. So again, we're putting the bolt head from the inside out. Putting a washer and then putting the nut. And for the time being, I'm just going to do this finger tight until I get all 4 of the bolts into that flange. Okay, so all of them are in. I've got my Milwaukee impact. I've got it turned down to number 1. I'm just going to press my finger up against the bolt head side and just tighten it. And you see, even though I don't have the screwdriver Phillips head to be able to hold that bolt head, it's still able to tighten up. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of this put together, and then we'll go from there. Now the only thing I caution you on that I'm noticing right now is the holes for the bolts are larger, significantly larger than the bolts. So there's wiggle room. So make sure that your flanges, especially at the top, are flush, okay? Where you don't have one a little bit lower or a little bit higher than the other. So make sure that that's the case before you go ahead and tighten all of those down. Okay, so we have this put together now. I know you guys are a little bit far away. I'll give you guys a close-up here in a little bit so you can see exactly why it's important to kind of grind those screws down. Is it critical? No, it's not. But the point of this build is to show you how to make this cabinet function to the best of its ability and assemble it according to that goal. Okay, so that's part of it. Anyway, we're going to flip this over. It doesn't matter which is front or back, whether if it's this side or this side. It's one of the longer sides. It's not going to be these. These are the sides of the cabinet. So, however, the trap door, it does matter. That trap door latch needs to go towards the front of the cabinet. So what we're going to do is we're going to install it that way. We're going to just say this is the front for the sake of saying that. Now, what you need to pay attention to is that this flange here on the hopper goes inside of the trap door, okay? It doesn't go on the outside, it goes on the inside. So it'll get a little bit awkward here for a short period of time because this is kind of bulky at this point. I got to be able to reach inside to put the bolts in, okay? So bear with me here. I know you guys are not going to see a lot of this just because of the angle I'm working in. So I've got this in place. I'm trying to reach in here and get a bolt in, which I got in right now. You can grab a washer and a nut. So now, the reason why that bolt has not fallen out is because when I put it through, I started pulling on the trap door, this little access drain door, whatever you want to call it, so that it pinched that bolt in the hole. I'm going to do that long enough just to get the nut on here, which for whatever reason doesn't want to go on properly. So I'm going to go ahead and get these all in. Like I said, there's 4 more bolts here. You guys get the idea. I'll be back. Okay, so you guys saw me putting this together. At some point I got wise and just opened up this hatch and reached in from this side versus stretching all the way around. I could have just left it down here like this and put that together a lot easier. Okay, that being said, lesson learned. It's all together. What I wanted to show you is inside of here, you see how that flange is not attached or not compressed here or here? What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to tap that a little bit flatter before I continue and see how this side's like that as well. And then we're going to use a product called Loctite PLS30 or PLS40. The only difference between the two of those models, I guess you can say the two PLS 3040, is color. This one's black, the other one's white. Now, this is paintable, and that's important because once the caulking on this cures completely, you have the option to go back and paint over the caulking. And Mike from Tacoma Company does recommend that you do so. The reason why he recommends that you do so is because the paint will create a slick surface over this caulking, which again aids in media flow back to the bottom of the cabinet or back to the bottom of the hopper where the pickup tube is. The faster the media goes from out of the gun back to the bottom of the cabinet means the less media you need to use in your cabinet, the more efficient the cabinet's running, And in the end, the easier it is to change out the media and replace it with a different type of media without having to worry about cross-contaminating. So what I'm going to do right now is two things. Number one, I'm going to flip this thing over, and on the inside of each one of these corners, I'm going to run a bead of this caulking, and I'm going to put on a set of gloves because this stuff will stain your hands, and it's very hard to get off. It takes a long time. And I'm going to run my finger down that corner to create a finger radius caulking seam. Now I'm not going to load it up, okay? I'm just using enough to keep it clean, do the job, and not have just a big, big goopy mess in there, okay? That's not necessary. The cleaner that install is, the better it is for that media flow back to the bottom of the cabinet. So I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to flip it back over the way you see it right now. And what I'm going to do is this piece comes in your kit. Okay, the installation kit of this cabinet. I don't honestly know what this is for. I haven't read the instructions that are sitting over there to really care. I know what I'm going to use it for based on what Mike over at the Tacoma company told me to do. And basically we're going to use this as a reinforcing flange for the existing flange for the hopper. So we're going to take some of that PLS 30 caulking, and between every one of the bolts we're going to apply some of it with our finger, a nice smooth flat application of that caulking all the way around this entire ring. And then we are going to take it with the caulking side facing towards this flange, and we're going to align up the bolt holes and press it into position. Now, ideally, wait till the next day before you continue on with anything that has to do with bolting the hopper to the cabinet. Due to time restraints, I'm going to apply that, I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to start working on the top part of the cabinet and all the modifications that need to be done there while this sets up, okay? The more it sets up, the better. The reason being is the point of having this flange, this extra flange on here, and the point of having that sealant on there is to strengthen the flange on the hopper so that when you bolt it together, it has a little bit more meat behind it when you're bolting it together. We're going to be using some of that foam tape that's in the box right there on that flange only, okay? So we'll talk about that later, but how I said that you have that pillow effect when you use that foam tape, this process helps to ensure or helps to eliminate some of that pillowed effect and help keep that sealed completely. So I'm going to go ahead and get this kind of set up so that you guys can see what I'm talking about as far as installing the caulking, and then we're going to set this aside and get on to the rest of this build. So I'll be right back. So I've got all four sides done. I think they look pretty clean. Not perfect, but clean. Definitely good enough. So again, I'm going to flip this over here on the ground. I'm going to grab that flange, and I'm going to essentially do what I did in here. Okay, I'm going to apply a little amount of the sealant, and I'm going to wipe it across there with my finger to flatten it out all the way around the entire ring. And then it's not going on this top side of the flange, it's going on the bottom. So that means that's why this has to be flipped over. I'm going to press it into place. I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to set it aside and start working on the rest of the cabinet. So, be right back. Okay, so I've got this laid out on the ground. This is kind of where I really wish I had my welding table cleaned off so I can do this there. But I'm getting ready to apply the urethane. And again, I'm not putting this on very thick, just real liberal. Just enough for me to smear it with my finger. Okay, so now that we've got that all coated, we're going to take it, it's going to come over here, and we're going to set it down on the hopper. Now it's very important to take our gloves off so we don't continue to make a mess, but it's very important to make sure that these bolt holes are lined up well, okay? The better you have them lined up, the better this whole situation is going to be when it comes to bolting the hopper to the rest of the cabinet. And then, after you get it in position, you're going to press down on it all the way around and make sure that you got a nice, tight bond between all of it. Now, you're not going to be able to, we're not bolting this into place right now, so it's not going to be perfectly compressed and sealed together. But if you press it into place evenly all over the place, it should bond in enough places where it's absolutely good enough. So now that I've got that together, I'm going to pick this up off of this foam stuff I've got here on the floor. And I'm just going to set it aside, and then we're going to start work on the rest of the cabinet. So, now that that's set aside, what we're looking for is the back panel. Okay? Or, if you haven't done it already, these side panels have the foam on them. You can get the foam out of them, but I'm not worried about that just yet. I could do that later. I'm going to start work on this back panel. Okay? This back panel, you see the size of that hole right there? It's really, really large. This side panel has that hole right there. Not the little one. Where is it? Not that one. I'm talking about that one. Now, according to Harbor Freight, this hole right here is where you attach your vacuum to. That is incorrect. Okay? It's incorrect by design. This hole, according to Harbor Freight, is where the air is sucked into the cabinet, the fresh air port, the intake port, which is, again, incorrect based on design. Okay? Now, the reason why I'm going to say that it is incorrect, and I'm going to try to explain this to you guys so that you hopefully will understand me. A blast cabinet requires negative pressure inside the cabinet itself. What negative pressure means is that it's trying to implode, I guess you can say. Now, I'm not talking about an enormous amount of negative pressure. I'm talking about a small amount of negative pressure. Now, if your vacuum is attached to the smaller hole and your fresh air intake is a very large hole like this, you will never build up negative pressure. The reason being is the hole that you're sucking the air out of is the bottleneck. It's the restriction. You want the restriction to be the hole where the fresh air comes into the cabinet so that you create that negative space inside the cabinet. Okay? So, with that being said, we're going to switch this by design. We're going to make this large hole where the vacuum attaches on the back of the cabinet, and we're going to make that small hole where the fresh air comes into the cabinet. Okay? Now, on this small hole side, we're not going to make any modifications to it at all. We're going to leave it just the way you see. In a future video where I install the upgrade kit that Tacoma Supply makes, we're going to modify this area to work properly in this cabinet, and we'll go over in detail on why these modifications are being done and everything in that video. So for now, that hole will just be left just as a hole. Now, the other reason why we're also taking the vacuum off of this hole rather than trying to close off this hole is because this is on the left side of the cabinet. Now, your gun comes into the cabinet on the right side. Your right hand is typically going to be the one that has the gun in your hand, and you're going to typically be shooting from right to left. Now, if I have a big gaping hole on the left side of this panel that has the vacuum sucking air out of that hole, where do you think your media is going to go? Is it going to drop down to the bottom of the cabinet, or is that vacuum going to suck your media right out of that hole because you're pointing it directly at it? So that's the other reason why we're going to make this the intake side versus the vacuum side. So it's just a bad design by Harbor Freight or whoever's designing these cabinets for Harbor Freight. It's a bad design. So one other thing I wanted to talk about real quick, this foam. This foam is something that has not always been on these cabinets. At a certain point in time, enough customers have complained about the cabinets leaking, where Harbor Freight decided, let's modify the design, let's have them go out there and they're going to put some sealing tape, some gasket type tape in there to help seal up these cabinets. The problem with that entire situation is it's a poor job, number one, but number two, they didn't change any of the dimensions of the cabinet whatsoever to accommodate the thickness of that tape. So that tape is a problem. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about in regards to that and the leaking is that if you have a proper vacuum setup in this cabinet, it will not leak out of the blast cabinet itself. It could leak out of the hopper. Now the reason why I say that it could leak out of the hopper and why we sealed up the hopper is because gravity could cause the blast media to leak out of the hopper, specifically that door. That door and junctions like right here. Okay? But again, that's why we sealed it, because now gravity will not be able to allow it to pour out of that area. The only way blast media would blow out of the cracks of the actual blast cabinet part, which is the upper part, is if you're creating positive pressure inside the cabinet. This could be due to two things. The amount of air that you're pushing into the cabinet via the gun is higher than the amount of air that you're sucking out of the cabinet via the vacuum cleaner, which creates a positive air pressure versus a negative air pressure, and in turn blows air out of wherever it can find, any gaps that it can find, hence blowing the media out of those gaps as well. If you're maintaining a negative pressure inside of your cabinet, even when you're squeezing the trigger or pressing the pedal to blast media and you're pumping all that air in, if you're maintaining your negative pressure inside of there, you should never have a situation where blast media or air is being blown out of the gaps of your cabinet. Okay? That is the other reason why it is extremely important to make sure that you have a proper vacuum setup in your cabinet. So, with that being said, everything that we're going to work on right now, as far as the modifications to this back panel, are going to be to improve that vacuum setup, as well as to improve, again, media flow to the hopper to the bottom of the cabinet. Now, on this back panel, if you look, we have the sheet metal box. The sheet metal box by design is to try to block media from going in and out of that hole. There's two problems with this design. Number one is the top is completely opened and blast media bounces around. It's going to drop down there, and if we have our vacuum set up down there, it's going to suck it right through there. So we need to close off the top. Now, the other problem with that design is this was originally clean air intake, and the clean air intake has access through here and here, and it's really not functioning properly. It's not the way it should be. A clean air intake, or even the exhaust, should suck from the bottom and go up. The reason why it should go up versus top down is because the media is heavy, okay? And if the media is heavy, it's going to have a hard time sucking that media up and out of the exhaust. So that's what we're working on. I hope that makes sense to you guys. The modifications we're going to make to this back panel absolutely need to be done before the cabinet is put together. What we're going to do is simple. We're going to take an angle grinder. You can use whatever tool you seem to think works best for you. I'm going to take an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel, and I'm going to cut right down this corner 2.5 inches down, right there and right there. Then I'm going to pull out this side and this side, flare them out a little bit so that I can take that 2.5 inch cut and push it back that way. I'm going to be creating a sloped enclosure. Okay, I'm not going to just cover the top of this. I want it to slope down. The reason why I want it to slope down is real simple. I don't want media to collect on top of that. I want it to fall off of the top of that and go back to the bottom of the cabinet. So sit tight. I'm going to get this set up, get my angle grinder out, cutoff wheel set up, mark this out, and we're going to make that modification. Okay, so I've got my Makita angle grinder with a cutoff wheel that Work Supply sent out to me, and I'm going to be cutting it right along the Sharpie line there. I'm going to be stopping right here, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. Okay, that, like I said, that's 2.5 inches down from the top, and then at that point from here is the break line where it will be bent in towards the back wall, and then these sides will be worked around. However you got to do it to keep that so it's a slope and clean, do what you need to do. You know, yes, I have welders. Yes, I could cut that. Yes, I can make it look perfect. But you guys all might not have that. So I'm going to try to do this as simple as possible, just to make sure that you guys can see a method of how to achieve the same thing without having to have welders and things like that. So that being said, let me get to cutting this, and then we'll go from there. So, pretty simple cut. Come over here to the other side. So, here's the finished deal. I just basically took a hammer, and once that was in there, held it down with my thumb. I didn't use a piece of wood. I just put my fingers through the hole on the back side and press this section out while pushing that forward. And it doesn't want to stay tight, so you got to hold it down while you're folding these tabs over. Now, I don't really like the look of it. It's sloppy. This powder coat or paint that Harbor Freight had put on this is terrible. Okay, it is absolutely terrible. It's coming off all over the thing. There's bubbles and separation stuff all over the whole cabinet. But it doesn't matter to me, okay? This thing's a sandblasting cabinet. I'm not really concerned about its finish. I want it to perform well. And the paint and stuff on the inside of this thing is probably going to get blown off at some point anyways. So that doesn't justify the poor coating on here. But this isn't about justifying Harbor Freight's product. This is about modifying their product to suit our needs. And utilizing a very inexpensive resource to build ourselves a very high quality cabinet. So we've got both side panels for the cabinet sitting here in front of us. Okay, I've taken the thin double stick tape and wrapped it from the front, top to the back, but not here on the bottom. So now what we're looking for is we're looking for the back panel, which is right here, the panel that we just modified, and we're looking for the front panel, which is over here. It's the panel where the gloves go into. Okay. Now, these panels have to go in prior to the top panel, which is the one with the glass. If you look at this one, you can see here how the edge is flanged on both edges here. That's because that flanged edge accommodates for this flange and for that flange on this one on the top side of the cabinet. It overlaps them. If you install this first or install them backwards, where this goes on before either the front or the back panel, it's not going to line up correctly. You're going to have a huge gap and alignment issues. So, the only thing I need to check is just to make sure that, okay, well I got a sticker on here. That means this is the top. That means this is going to come in here just like that, okay, inside the side panel flanges. So we're going to get that. I'm going to set you guys on the tripod. I'm going to put some bolts in there and put some bolts in this back panel, and then we're going to get both sides secured together, and then we'll start working on the top piece. From the factory. So I'm sticking this panel in place again. There's a sticker on here. This side's up. Putting it into place, and again, I'm going to put my bolts inside facing out. Yes, the instructions say to do it differently, and yes, you'll have a bunch of stuff sticking out. If you want to later, you can grind all that down. Okay, so I got the sides, the front, and the back completely bolted together. A couple things I want to mention. On the front, it's pretty straightforward. You got 3 bolt holes there and there. On the back, we have that one strange flange, okay, on this side, which would be the left side of the cabinet when you're facing the front. That's all pretty straightforward, right? But down here, this flange is a lot bigger, and it has 4 bolts dead center, and then all of a sudden you have like 3 bolt holes here. These 2 are for the leg. This one is the one you need to put in. There's a hole in the leg already compensating a large hole so that you don't have to bolt this in with the leg. This goes in right now, okay? So, I've got the top panel placed in loosely. Let me come to this other side so I'm light shining in the way. You got to put it in from the inside. It's a flexible panel, so just work with it, get it in there, and then, like I said, it's got the reliefs here and there to adjust for that. So we're going to go ahead and get all the bolts and bolt it together. I'm not going to show you guys that because it's not really necessary for me to show you that. One thing that I am going to stop and take a look at, because I think I may have forgot a step, and this isn't Mike's steps. This is the step, I'm kind of following Harbor Freight's instructions with this stuff. This is all the straightforward with the exception of the direction of the bolts and the double stick tape in here. But as far as the way these panels go together, this is all Harbor Freight's instructions. This is not Mike's instructions. Mike's instructions were for the modifications that need to be made. So we never talked about this door hinge, and I'm looking at it right now, and the only place I can see that actually attaching to is these 4 bolts. So I'm going to check the instructions, the Harbor Freight instructions, and make sure that's not the case, or make sure that that's the case, that I address that pretty quickly, so that this way I I don't seal it up and make it a real big nightmare for me to loosen those bolts up and get that door put on. So I'm going to check that out. Okay, so I was right. The door did need to be bolted on these 4 bolts. Real simple, just pulled them out and then slid the door onto the bolts and then tightened it down. Okay, so now I've got to bring something up that is not in the Harbor Freight instructions and was never mentioned to me by Mike. It just could be something that he overlooked or something that he maybe thought was in the instructions, but it's not. This clasp is what closes this door, okay? If you look, there's nothing here on the door to grab a hold of it with. Now I have the part over there on the side, but what I want to show you, even here, I put the screws, the machine screws from the inside facing out. Let's just stay consistent. On to this issue with the door. Okay. In the instructions, in the Harbor Freight instructions, they don't even show that there. Okay, if you look right here, get this to focus, they just show the recessed door, you know, the little indent in the door, but they don't show the latch there. Down here, they actually, where am I at here? Down here, they actually show the clasp, the hasp, or whatever you want to call it. On this side, you can kind of see the part that goes there. And you see the latch again. But there's nothing else anywhere else on here that shows that or talks about that. So now, here it is. It is included. There's 3 screws, okay? These are not bolts that go through that. They're screws. And again, because they don't talk about it, they don't tell me what number I need to select here. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to flip this back over and hopefully I don't dump these screws. Oh, by the way, the little latch for the door uses the 50, 54, and 59 screws, nut washer set. So in here, if you look right there, there's some 3 screws, tapping screws. Those are what I'm looking for. That would be number 38, okay? So I'm going to pop that open. I'm going to pull those out, and I'm going to install this with the number 38 screws. So here's where we're at with this. I went inside. I checked out some instructions. I looked over this thing. Everything looks great. It's coming along well. Our next step is to attach the legs to it. But before I do that, I want to show you, those 3 screws did go in here. The latch is pulling it pretty tight. I have some gaps there on the back. I may try to loosen these bolts up here and see if I can get that to shift in a little bit. I'm going to get the legs. I got the 4 legs right here. And I'm going to get the shelf. I'm going to use the shelf for alignment purposes. Okay, so I've got the cabinet laid here on the ground. I've got 2 of the legs, and we're going to start on the back, okay? Now, one thing I want to show you is the nuts and bolts and the parts that or the 3 parts that are required to put the legs on. Okay, as far as the nuts and bolts are concerned, what you need is the section of the nut and bolt package that is 43, 52, and 57. Okay, these bolts are a little bit different than what we've been using. And then there's also section, section 34. And in section 34, you have these red shims. There's only 3 of them. The reason why there's only 3 of them, well, listen, let me tell you what they're for, okay? Right here you have a lip. This is lower than this surface. So that shim is to build up this surface so that they're equal. The reason why you only have 3 and you have 4 legs is because on this leg, or this side of the cabinet where the door is, you don't have it stepped down because it's got a bigger lip there, or whatever you want to call it. So that's why you only have 3. So again, we're going to put the bolts inside facing out. So let me get you on the camera, or get you on the tripod. Keep saying that. And let's get this done because it's getting pretty late. Let me give you a close-up of that. I'll get all the other legs attached, and then I'll show you guys me attaching the shell. So you see how the large cutout there is for that access for that one bolt? Pretty simple, straightforward. I'm going to do the other 3 legs, then we're going to get this shelf in here. What I actually may do, to be perfectly honest with you, I may start putting the shelf in after I get that second leg on, then flip it over. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to play that by ear. You do whatever's comfortable for you. The reason why I say I'm not sure is because when I flip it over, it may start bending the lip on it. So, maybe not. Anyways, be right back. Okay, so I got the legs attached. I went ahead and just tightened them. Not like really cranked down, but I tightened them pretty decent. They're still able to move though if you need to shift them around. Okay. The reason I did that was because it was just way too sloppy, and quite frankly, I was hoping to be able to get it a little bit tighter so that I can do this in this position. So here we are with the shelf. Now, one thing I want to point out is something that I would hope would be obvious to a lot of you guys, but apparently it's not, because I've seen a number of these cabinets installed where this shelf is upside down. Okay, the fact of the matter is this has a lip. You see that? That lip goes towards the bottom of the cabinet. Because this cabinet is currently upside down, that lip needs to be facing up. The reason why some of these people are flipping it over is because like, oh, that makes a really nice shelf to put all your crap on. But the fact of the matter is this is a sandblaster, and if you decide to have a shelf that is like a container that has raised walls, eventually it's going to collect a bunch of dirt and garbage and crap in there, and it's not designed to be that way. Even the center has this rolled lip so that anything that gets on that shelf is easily removed by blowing it off or, wiping it towards the edges and letting it come off. You can do whatever you want on your design, on your cabinet, but I'm going to install mine the proper way. So I've got it sitting in there right now. It's the same set of bolts, nuts, and washers. I'm just going to raise it up, put them in place, tighten them up, where I'm not using a screwdriver on the inside, just holding it with my finger, tightening it up. Then I'm going to go back and hit all of the bolts that actually go into the cabinet, and I'm going to really tighten them. I'm not going to tighten them so tight that I break the bolts. These things came from China, so you don't want to put 100 foot-pounds of torque on a machine screw. But I'm going to get them tight, so that this way, when I flip this back over and remove this shelf, we don't have any issues with it, with the legs moving out of alignment, okay? So, with that being said, let me get you guys on the tripod, and I'll get to work. I'm going to skip a bunch of this stuff, because you guys don't need to see me bolting and bolting and bolting. I'm pretty sure you don't want to see that either. So I'm going to get a couple in here. Okay, got them all nice and tight. Time to flip this over and take the shelf down. And thank goodness for uneven floors. so that thing wobbles around nice and neat. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the shelf down. I'm going to get my floor jack underneath the hopper, right there where the little trap door is. And I'm going to use my floor jack to lift that up, since I don't have an extra set of hands here. Some would say, well, why don't you install it upside down the way you had it? And I'm going to show you why in just a little bit. There's a reason behind it. It's an alignment issue. Again, we're trying to make media flow as efficient as possible. We're trying to get rid of any lips or any unnecessary ledges. So with that being said, the reason why we're doing this upright is so that we can get that hopper perfectly centered inside of it. Okay? So give me a second. We got the floor jack in place. We got the shelf out. We got the hopper in place. So now I'm just jacking this up and raising it up into position. Oh, I forgot a step. Luckily I caught this before I screwed up. I could do this in its position. This is where we're going to actually use the foam tape. Okay? Let me get you guys off the tripod so you can get a better look. So, the foam tape is going to go along this edge here, centered, obviously, and we're going to just put a strip across here, strip across the back ledge, and then connect the two sides. And then before we put it up there though, what I'm going to suggest is that you guys punch a hole everywhere where there's a bolt hole so that it'll help you with alignment, okay? Bolt alignment. And then at that point, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to raise it all the way up. And what we're looking to do is align these edges. We want it to be uniform all the way around, so it's completely centered. Now this lip is terrible, okay? It's going to hold blast media. Now, what I will tell you is this. I know the Tacoma company sells something to address that problem. Will I have that in this kit? Probably not, but I will get that at some point. So it will be a future video down the road. Look out for it. I'm going to keep upgrading this cabinet until this cabinet's to the best of its absolute abilities, or performs to the best of its absolute abilities. Whatever, you get what I mean. Performs to the best of its abilities. And these are all going to be upgrades that are based upon the recommendations and suggestions of Mike over at the Tacoma company. So I've got the bottom, the hopper, put up into place. Everything's just kind of finger tight. So I want you to see what I'm looking at inside of here. Essentially, let's look at the corners. It's this radiused edge on the hopper sticks out past the lip here and here. Seems to be pretty consistent here and here. However, if we look over here, there's a major inconsistency. It's pushed in way in off the back, and kind of the same thing here off the front, and same thing off the front as well. So the goal right now is to try to get that centered in there as best as possible, and then at that point tighten everything down. Okay, so here we are on the back of this cabinet. Got the shelf, got all that stuff tightened up. Now, Harbor Freight, and grab one more piece. Harbor Freight supplies you with this and this and this flange here. Okay? See that flange? This flange goes on the intake side, or what we're using as the intake side. Normally everybody else is using that as the vacuum side. Now, what this flange is it's a vacuum cleaner flange, so that your fittings, your vacuum cleaner hose can attach to it. because we're changing where our vacuum cleaner attaches to, and we're now using this to be our vacuum cleaner hole, we've got to make some modifications, okay? First things first, this is a plug that just presses into there. This other plug is designed to go over that flange, so that if you decided that you wanted to use this blast cabinet without a vacuum, that you could. That is the most, I'm not going to say stupid, even though that's what was coming to mind. That is the quickest way for you to create leaks in this cabinet, is to run this thing with plugs in it and no vacuum system. The reason being is you're pumping this full of air. You're turning this into a compressor tank, okay? Because you're forcing air into it. It has nowhere to go outside of any gaps. That is the worst thing that you can do. So, if you are trying to run a blast cabinet, it is absolutely imperative that you have a vacuum system hooked up. These plugs should go right in the garbage, okay? This plug, however, we're going to modify. So, here's what I'm doing. I took that flange, I went to Lowe's, and I went to Lowe's with my vacuum cleaner parts. Now, my vacuum may be too small for this, but we'll talk about that in a later video. I have a smaller vacuum hose, and then I have this piece, which the vacuum hose slides onto that, and then this goes into the vacuum. Now, they only supply you with one of these from the vacuum cleaner manufacturer. When you buy it, you only get one. This slides perfectly inside of that flange. So I had to come up with another solution. So I went to Lowe's, and I found this piece of rubber plumbing, adapter. Has some band clamps on here. And I found this piece, this elbow, which, honestly, I don't remember what size it is. I think it's 1 inch. Anyways, it fit inside of here with some little bit of stretching, and this slides onto there, without too much of a gap and without too much effort, because I don't want to damage my vacuum cleaner hose. So the plan is simple. I'm going to cut a hole in this plug, and I'm going to bolt that flange to that, and we're going to have a setup just like this. Okay? Now, I'm sure there's some intelligent people watching this video that says, well, you started out with a big hole, but now you have a small one because you're reducing it down to the size of the vacuum cleaner hose. You would be correct. Okay. Now, with that being said, what I'm going to do temporarily until I get the intake mod that they have for this cabinet, which is an adjustable air inlet so that you can regulate the pressure. I could fabricate something. Absolutely I could. There's no reason why I couldn't. But the Tacoma company has something, and I would like to build this thing to their specs. Okay? So, we're not going to mess with the intake side of this because they have a box for it, and they have that air regulator set up. We'll get that when we get that, and we'll install it in a future video. Okay? But for now, what we're going to focus on is the vacuum cleaner side of this project. So, with that being said, I don't need this anymore. That goes onto my vacuum cleaner. Okay. What I need is to take this plug out, and I need to center this on that plug, and I need to mark out the hole that I need to cut in here and the drill holes for the bolts and make this all work. Okay? Okay, so here we are at the drill press. Let me get you guys a decent view here. I don't know what size a hole saw's on here, to be perfectly honest with you. What I basically did is I took this flange. I had a hole saw already set up on this, whatever you want to call it, and it looked like it was good enough. That's the one we're using. Okay, you can use whatever size suit your needs, but the bottom line is this vacuum setup, you're going to have to customize to work with whatever vacuum system you have. Okay, and like I said, we're going to talk about the whole vacuum setup at length in a different video. Okay, this one we're just trying to get the basics done so that you guys can understand how to assemble this thing, and then from there we'll talk about more detailed aspects of sandblasting and this cabinet and how you can improve it. I'm just going to hold this thing, which is probably going to cause it to start spinning around on me. I'm eyeballing center, which is probably not a good thing. Whoa, wow. That's some good quality Chinese stuff right there. So, yes, it broke. And yes, I'm going to continue to try to drill out the hole. Okay, so like I said, it did break. I didn't apply a whole lot of pressure, and the bad thing about it is that when it broke, now I lost my center. Okay, I'll still make this work. Let me show you guys. You know, it's off center a little bit. I'll still be able to make it work. It's not that big of an issue. Even if I completely destroyed it, I'd figure out a way to make it work. So let that be a lesson learned when it comes time for you guys to do this. Hardly put any pressure on this so you don't break it, because obviously it's high quality plastic. So, with that being said, now the objective is to line up this flange with that hole and drill out the 4 holes that I need to bolt that flange on. So now I got to find a drill bit that'll work for that. I'm going to be using my Brute Platinum drill bits that I got from Rourke Supply. These things are awesome. And the size of drill bit I'm going to use is, hold on, drum roll, still a drum roll, a little bit longer drum roll. And we found it. We're using 3/16. Okay. Now, again, because this is off-centered due to the high-quality nature of the plastic, I'm going to hold this close to its off-centered position. I'm going to line up my drill bit with the flange, and that's where we're going to drill it. Now, I'm going to make a suggestion here. And that suggestion is going to be pretty simple. Once you get the first bolt or first hole in there, I'm going to suggest go grab the bolts that you need for this. Bolt that first one in just loosely and use that as a guide so that you can get the others drilled. Okay? Okay, so change of plans happened in the middle of doing this. Basically, I drilled out the 1 hole and went to go get the screws so that I could do what I said, put 1 in, bolt it into place, and then use that as a guide. What I found out is the screws that go for this flange on that left side of the cabinet over there, that side of the cabinet, are not long enough to go through this flange and this plug, if you will. So, with that being said, the problem I had, or the solution that I had, was that I have a bunch of self-tapping sheet metal screws. I've got literally thousands of them. So I grabbed some of them and I decided to use that. Okay, they have that little drill tip on the end of it, which prevented this from cracking on me. Worked out great. Okay, I didn't have to find the right size of drill bit for another type of screw, like a tapping screw. These self-tappers worked fantastic. So, I've got this all put back together, okay, and it just plugs into place like this, okay. I'm not going to put the caulking around here, the Loctite, just yet, because I've got some other things that I want to focus on before I do that. However, this is the final product. That is my setup. Okay. And I think it's pretty good. I think it'll work out good. I like that I have a 90. I'm not vacuuming up garbage. I'm trying to get air, and hopefully if this is all set up right, there's going to be very little media in it. So I'm not worried about the 90 causing issues. It will cause a little bit of turbulence. That's just the nature of the game. But my main concern is that my vacuum cleaner, it's a 6 horsepower shop vac. I'm hoping that it is strong enough to do what I need to do. Okay, so again, we'll talk about that in a future video. Okay, so here we are at this last segment. Okay, as you can see, the cabinet itself is not 100% complete, but we're to the point where I'm going to stop for a couple of reasons. We'll talk about that shortly. Number one is this video is extremely long right now, and I don't need to walk you through step by step showing you the rest of this installation. It's pretty straightforward. However, I'm sure you guys are like, well, what about the guts? What about the gun, the hose, the pickup tube, the light, the switch box, all of that stuff? I'm not going to show you how to install this. Why? Because all of this is garbage. None of this performs well. I will have a future video showing you guys how to install the Tacoma Company's upgrade kit. I will put this in this cabinet for the purposes of shooting a before and after video so that you guys can see the comparison between the stock setup and the Tacoma Company's upgrade kit. However, I'm going to tell you, there's lots and lots of complaints about this 12-volt light failing, lots of complaints about the crappy switch box, and lots of complaints about the gun and stuff not working properly. So, it's junk. Not junk, but you could probably use it for something else if you really wanted to. But it doesn't work well. So anyway, next thing I want to talk about is the glove installation. You have 4 parts. You have the glove, right? You have the cuff flange or whatever, the glove flange. And then you have a gasket, which sits between there and the cabinet. And then you have a large hose clamp type deal, band clamp, whatever you want to call it, that attaches the glove to the cuff. Now, this cuff has the big flange here. You slide the glove over the flange, then you slide that clamp on there, and you just tighten it down with a Phillips head screwdriver, and you're done. Make sure that you got your nut and washer on this side, and your screws here. There's 6 of them. Pretty straightforward. Make sure your left hand gloves in the left hole, right hand gloves in the right hole, unless you got weird arms. The other thing that may help you guys save some time, make sure your glove is oriented properly. Basically, make sure the top of your hand is at the top of the glove. The top of the glove is straight up and your thumb's facing in the proper direction. You don't want to have it in there twisted, then you put your hand in, and then when you rotate your hand back, the glove twists down on your arm and it just restricts your movement. So make sure it's in there properly. Save you some time if you do it wrong. The grate. I didn't show you anything about the grate because I'm going to modify this thing. Basically, you could just put it in just like that if you want to. I'm going to actually cut this thing down in a future video so that it sits much deeper in the cabinet. Now, I never installed this piece right here. That piece would normally go underneath the grate. It goes between the hopper and the upper part of the cabinet. We didn't install it for a number of different reasons. It's never going to be installed. And someone would say, oh, but that's support for this grate. This grate is wire, like a high strength wire. It does flex. It is not going to bend and break or anything like that. It is very strong. You do not need that other piece. That other piece is only going to cause problems as far as building up media and holding it and not allowing it to drop to the bottom of the cabinet. It's more headache than it's worth. This is a better setup. So with that being said, let's talk about the glass. The glass is pretty simple. Here's what you get in the box. You get this double strength glass right here. You get some of these tear-offs that stick to the double strength glass. And you get this piece of plexiglass. Okay? The plexiglass you would think would go towards the bottom, and the top, the actual glass would be at the top. Because what you do is you set it on this flange here, on this panel. You would think that the double strength glass would be down. You'd think the plexiglass would be down, but you would be wrong. That plexiglass is there because the actual glass is not tempered. It's not a safety glass. So they're using that plexiglass as a safety feature. Okay, and that's why it's on top. I'm going to highly suggest that you just get rid of it. And that's also by the recommendation of Mike over at the Tacoma Company for a number of reasons. The plexiglass has a static cling type deal. It creates static. You're blasting in there. You're creating static as well. So all the dust and particles and things like that are going to naturally want to attach to that glass, and it's going to obstruct your view. And well, quite frankly, our goal is to make this perform well, and having your glass covered in dust is not a good thing. It's not good performance. So here's what we're going to suggest. Go to Lowe's. And the only reason I say go to Lowe's is because, and I'm not sure if all Lowe's has this, but from what I understand, Lowe's has the ability to cut glass, and they also sell glass. Okay? You can get, now don't hold me to these prices. This is what I'm told by others who have gone there. You can get a 24 by 36 inch sheet of glass at Lowe's, have them cut it for free, and it will be a single strength glass, which is as thick as this, the plexiglass. Okay? You'll be able to get 3 pieces out of that one sheet for $14. That single strength glass is going to be your throwaway glass. You're going to get rid of these little tearaways or whatever you want to call them, and you're going to put your single strength glass on first, then the double strength glass that they give you second. Now someone would say, well, what are you going to use for that protection? You're not going to use anything. If you're really concerned about the glass breaking on you for whatever reason, you have the option to go out and get like a tempered glass, some sort of safety glass, something like that, if you're really concerned about it. But I don't have any reports of anybody breaking these sheets of glass without dropping them on the floor or bashing something into it. So you should be okay there, but it's your call on what you decide to do, but that's the recommendation. The last thing is the reason why I did not install that. Number one, I don't have that glass yet. But number two, this is the tape, the foam tape that they gave with this kit. Now, as you saw earlier in the video, I needed a bunch of this to seal off between the hopper and the upper cabinet. Well, this is all I have left, with the exception of that tiny curly Q right there. It's not enough for me to go around the perimeter of this. So, plus it's cheap. So here's what you need to get, and this is based off the recommendation of Mike at the Tacoma Company. You're looking for 3/4 inch wide, high density foam tape, and you're looking for it to not be any thicker than 1/8 inch. The reason why that 1/8 inch is critical is because if you decide down the road, and you probably will, to get to the Tacoma Company's quick change glass kit, that 1/8 inch foam is very important. Okay, their kit is designed to work with that foam. They designed their kit based around the Harbor Freight cabinets that they used to sell that had the foam already attached to the panel, but they no longer do that apparently, or I just got an oddball one. The reason why I'm saying that you'll probably want that kit is simple. The glass is something that you're going to have to change out. If you're using this all the time, the glass is something that you're going to have to change out on a fairly frequent basis. It's a consumable. Okay, you're blasting in here, the glass is going to get etched. It is what it is. Now, to change this glass or even to install it, you're going to either have to remove this glove so that you can reach in through the glove hole to hold the nuts and stuff from the inside, or you're going to have really long arms like an octopus to be able to reach in here and reach across here with the other hand, or have somebody help you to be able to remove and tighten all of these bolts. Their kit eliminates you having to get inside the cabinet, allows you to do everything from the outside, makes it much easier. So we'll talk about that kit once I get it and install it, and I'll show you guys that kit, and we'll go over that in great detail. But for now, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys learned some stuff. That's the purpose of this. I know it was extremely lengthy, but that information that I shared with you guys, I feel is very, very important. I did want to say again to you guys that putting all of the bolts from the inside out is not necessary. The only ones that is necessary is on the hopper and down here between the hopper and the cabinet itself. The reason why those are necessary is just so that media management, media flow, but also so that when you're trying to clean the cabinet out and get all the media down into the hopper, you don't want studs sticking up in here while you're trying to dust around it, because it makes it more difficult to get the media out of there. Okay, it tears up your brushes and things like that. I also kind of think that, my personal opinion is, I like having that all over the entire cabinet where it's just the head. But I also think it kind of looks a little bit neat, that spiky look. It's cool. But I'm going to forewarn you, if you guys choose to have all the bolts facing out the way I do on this cabinet, you could scratch your hand on these things. You could hook your clothes on them, things like that. So it's something that you may want to, consider whether or not you want to do that all over the cabinet. But for sure, do it on the hopper, and for sure, do it on the hopper flange or bolts to the cabinet. That's an absolute, very important aspect to the modifications that we did to the cabinet. So with that being said, make sure you go check out the Tacoma Company. The link to their website is in the video description. But more importantly, give Mike a call. He's a real friendly guy, real knowledgeable. He'll help you out. He'll be glad to talk to you. Really intelligent. Like I said, he's been doing this stuff since before I was born, and he's got a plethora of information. So their website doesn't have anything other than really contact information and some links to some videos, but that's about it. It's just a one-page deal, so it's very vague. His kit is made in the United States. He is a U.S.-based company. It's a small company, and he's working at capacity, so you got to bear with him on as far as the shortcomings when it comes to internet marketing and things like that. So also check out RourkeSupply.com. Use coupon code METAL. That's my thank you to you, and Rourke Supply's thank you to you for supporting my channel. That'll give you 10% off anything that you order from them. So make sure to check them out. They got some cool stuff there as well. So thanks for watching. Like always, subscribe, comment, like, and I'll talk to you later.